Imagine a biological anomaly, a piece of living technology so resilient that if you planted it just once, it could provide a harvest for your children, your grandchildren, and their children after them. This is not a science fiction concept. This is a survivor of the ancient world that we have been conditioned to forget. Imagine a crop that laughs at the threats that keep industrial farmers awake at night. It doesn't fear the scorched earth of a record-breaking drought. It isn't strangled by the frost that turns potatoes into black mush. It requires no chemical cocktails, no patented pesticides, and most importantly, it requires no annual trip to a seed corporation to buy permission to grow it again. This is the Jerusalem Artichoke, the sunroot, the wild sunflower. To the modern eye, it is a weed, a nuisance that grows in the forgotten ditches of North America and the abandoned plots of Europe. But to the empires of the past, it was the Invincible Ghost. It has fueled civilizations through the darkest winters of human history. It has been the silent savior during the siege of Paris and the starvation of the world wars. Yet, walk into any high-end supermarket today. Scan the rows of perfectly waxed apples and genetically uniform corn. You won't find it. Why did a plant that provides total food independence vanish from our collective memory? Why was a crop that yields more calories per acre than almost any other vegetable systematically erased from the global menu? The answer isn't a failure of biology. It is a success of industry. The sunroot was not abandoned because it was a bad crop. It was abandoned because it was too good. In a world where food is a commodity, a plant that gives itself away for free is a threat to the bottom line. It is difficult to tax, impossible to monopolize, and refuses to submit to the sterile rows of industrial agriculture. We are told that our modern food system is the pinnacle of human achievement. But what if the key to our survival isn't waiting for us in a laboratory? What if the most powerful tool for human resilience is already growing, unnoticed, beneath your feet? This is not just a story about a forgotten vegetable. This is an audit of our stolen independence. This is the mystery of the plant that refused to die. To truly understand the sunchoke, we must first peel back the layers of history, past the industrial smog, past the concrete highways, and beyond the very concept of land as a commodity. Long before the first European sails broke the horizon, the continent of North America was not a wild, untamed wilderness. It was a sophisticated, living masterpiece of ecological engineering. At the heart of this ancient food system was a plant that the indigenous peoples of the Great Plains, the Ohio Valley, and the eastern woodlands held in the highest regard. They called it the sunroot. In the modern world, we are taught that agriculture is a battle, a constant war against weeds, pests, and the exhaustion of the soil. But for the Cherokee, the Haudenosaunee, and the Dakota, agriculture was a pact. The sunroot was the physical manifestation of that agreement. While other crops, like corn, demanded constant human intervention, precise seasonal planting, guarding against birds, and back-breaking weeding, the sunroot offered a different, more generous philosophy. It was a perennial warrior. Biologically, the sunroot is a marvel of evolutionary design. Unlike the modern potato or the grains that dominate our diet today, it does not exist as an annual guest in the soil. It is a permanent resident. If a community harvested 90% of a patch in the autumn, the remaining 10% would aggressively and faithfully recolonize the area by the following spring. It was a self-replenishing pantry. For the first people, this wasn't just a botanical trait. It was a form of generational wealth. To plant a patch of sunroots was to ensure that your grandchildren would never know the true meaning of famine. This plant was so vital that it became a primary currency of the ancient world. Archaeological evidence and oral traditions suggest that these knobby, golden tubers were traded across thousands of miles. They moved along the great river arteries of the Mississippi and the Missouri, traveling from the sun-drenched prairies to the rocky coasts of the Atlantic. It was a living technology, passed from hand to hand. When tribes migrated, they carried the sunroot with them, not just as food, but as an insurance policy. If a season turned brutal, or if the buffalo were scarce, the sunroots remained hidden in the earth, waiting, dormant, and invincible. They were the underground memory of a continent. The relationship was symbiotic, not exploitative. The indigenous peoples didn't farm the sunroot in the way we understand the term. They stewarded it. They understood that the plant's 10-foot-tall stalks, crowned with brilliant yellow blossoms, were capturing the energy of the summer sun and pumping it deep into the cool, dark earth, transforming light into life-sustaining fiber. It was a literal sun gift. In the mythology of many tribes, the plant was seen as a bridge between the celestial and the terrestrial, the sun's fire stored in the belly of the Earth Mother. This was a culture of abundance that required no fences. There was no need to hoard seeds in locked vaults because the seeds were already in the ground, protected by the soil itself. You didn't own a sunroot field any more than you owned the wind. You simply knew where the gift was buried. This indigenous philosophy of passive abundance is exactly what makes the sunroot so fascinating and so dangerous to the history that followed. It represents a time when human survival was not tied to a market or a monarch, but to the natural resilience of the land. The sunroot didn't just provide calories, it provided autonomy. It allowed communities to remain mobile, resilient, and free. It was a plant that required nothing from the people but their respect. As we look at the gnarled, irregular shapes of these tubers today, we aren't just looking at a vegetable. We are looking at a relic of a lost world. We are looking at the foundational crop of a civilization that understood something we have forgotten. That true security is not found in how much you can extract from the earth in a single year, but in how well you can partner with the plants that refuse to leave it. The sunroot was the first line of defense against hunger, a silent guardian that stood for centuries before the world changed and the Great Forgetting began. In 1603, the French explorer Samuel de Champlain stood on the banks of what is now Cape Cod and watched the indigenous people harvesting a strange, gnarled root. He tasted it and was immediately struck by its flavor, a delicate, nutty profile that reminded him of a refined artichoke. He brought the tubers back to France, and for a fleeting moment in history, the sunroot was the darling of European aristocracy. It was served at the tables of kings and praised by the greatest botanists of the age. It seemed destined to become the foundational starch of the Old World. But history is rarely a straight line, and the fate of the sunchoke was about to collide with a rival that would change the world: the potato. As the 17th and 18th centuries progressed, European powers were looking for a crop that could fuel the Industrial Revolution and feed the growing urban masses. The potato, arriving from the Andes, was chosen as the winner. Why? Not because it was more nutritious. The sunroot actually contains more minerals and a unique type of fiber, But because the potato was controllable, it fit perfectly into the emerging systems of the modern state. Potatoes grew in neat, predictable rows. They were easy to count, easy to store in massive warehouses, and, most importantly, easy to tax. The sunroot, true to its wild origins, refused to be tamed. It was messy. It spread through gardens like a wildfire. If a farmer tried to clear a field to plant something else, the sunroot would simply grow back from the tiniest fragment left behind. To the burgeoning bureaucratic mind of Europe, a plant that you couldn't get rid of was not an asset. It was a nuisance. It was a weed. As the potato took the throne, the sunroot was pushed to the margins. It became the food of the poor, the hog potato, grown only by those who couldn't afford real seeds. But then, the 20th century arrived, and with it came the Great Wars. In the 1940s, as the shadow of the Second World War fell over Europe, the industrial food system collapsed. The Nazis seized the potato harvests of occupied France in the Low Countries to feed their armies on the front. Millions were left with nothing. In this moment of total darkness, the Invincible Ghost returned. People remembered the topinambar growing wild in the ditches in the abandoned backyards. It became the only thing standing between entire cities and starvation. Because the German occupiers didn't value it and couldn't easily seize a crop that was buried haphazardly in the frozen mud, the sunroot became the secret resistance of the starving. It was the bread of the occupation. But survival has a psychological cost. When the war finally ended and the Marshall Plan brought back white bread and industrial sugar, the people of Europe wanted to bury the memory of their trauma. Because they had eaten the sunroot out of desperate necessity, the plant became a trigger for the memory of hunger, fear, and the cold. To eat a Jerusalem artichoke in 1950 was to admit you were still living in the ruins. Modernity demanded progress, and progress meant uniformity. The sunroot was discarded, not because it had failed to provide, but because it had provided too well during a time everyone wanted to forget. It was turned into a scapegoat for the misery of the war. We chose the potato and the grain because they represented the new world of order and industry, while the sunroot represented the old world of wild, uncontrollable resilience. For decades, the plant was relegated to the status of a famine food. It was erased from the culinary textbooks and vanished from the public consciousness. We were taught to view its persistent growth as a threat to our manicured gardens, rather than a miracle of survival. We traded a plant that could feed us for free during a world war for a system that leaves us vulnerable the moment the grocery store shelves go empty. The great forgetting was complete. The sunroot didn't lose the battle of biology. It lost the battle of perception. It remained in the soil, hidden and waiting, while we built a world of fragile abundance on top of it. To understand why the sunchoke is missing from our modern world, we must look past the garden fence and into the boardrooms of global agribusiness. The disappearance of this plant was not an accident of taste. It was a structural necessity for a system built on dependency. In the world of industrial agriculture, a crop that provides total independence is not an asset. It is a glitch in the machine. Modern agriculture is built on a subscription model. Every spring, the industrial farmer must purchase a new license to exist. They buy patented annual seeds that cannot be saved. They buy specific chemical fertilizers because the soil has been stripped of its natural life. They buy targeted herbicides to kill anything that isn't their primary product. This is a trillion-dollar cycle of forced consumption. The Jerusalem artichoke shatters this cycle. It is a biological rebellion against the very concept of the annual purchase. Because it is a perennial that regenerates itself from its own tubers, it eliminates the need for a seed salesman. Because it grows 10 feet tall and shades out competitors with a dense canopy, it eliminates the need for expensive herbicides. Because its deep root system mines minerals from the subsoil, it often thrives where other crops starve, reducing the need for synthetic inputs. In short, you cannot build a monopoly around a plant that refuses to die and costs nothing to maintain. There are 4 systemic reasons why the system has suppressed the sunroot. First, the taxability problem. Governments and corporations love the point of sale. Grains and potatoes are harvested all at once, shipped to massive centralized silos, and tracked through a global ledger. They are easy to measure, easy to price, and easy to tax. But the sunroot is decentralized by nature. It is best harvested on demand from the frozen ground throughout the winter. It is a living seller. You cannot easily put a barcode on a crop that stays in the dirt until the moment you want to eat it. It is the agricultural equivalent of cash in a world that wants everyone to use a credit card. Second, the storage paradox. The sunroot has a thin, delicate skin. It doesn't like to sit in a pressurized shipping container for 3 weeks. It doesn't play well with a global logistics chain that demands a tomato be shelf-stable for a month. To the industrialist, this is a flaw. To the survivor, this is a feature. It is a plant that demands a local food system. It forces you to be connected to your own land. By its very biology, it rejects the globalist model of food distribution. Third, the invasive threat. In the eyes of industrial monoculture, anything that cannot be easily killed is an invasive weed. Because the sunchoke is so resilient, it is difficult to clear a field if a farmer wants to switch to a different, more profitable patented crop next year. It represents a permanent commitment to the land. Corporate agriculture hates commitment. It wants flexibility, the ability to pivot to whatever commodity is trading highest on the Chicago Board of Trade. The sunroot's persistence is seen as a liability because it places the plant's survival above the farmer's profit margin. Fourth, the calorie per acre threat. If the public realized that they could grow thousands of pounds of calorie-dense medicinal food in a suburban backyard or a vacant city lot with almost zero labor, the artificial scarcity that keeps food prices high would begin to crumble. The sunchoke is a yield monster. It produces more biomass and more raw energy per square foot than almost any other temperate crop. If everyone had a 10-by-10 patch of sunroots, the food security industry would lose its leverage. We are told that we need high-tech solutions, GMOs, lab-grown meats, and vertical farms to feed a growing planet. But the sunchoke proves that the solution has been here all along. We don't have a production problem, we have a control problem. The suppression of the sunroot is a quiet admission by the industrial complex that nature's own technology is still superior to anything they can patent. They don't want you to grow it because they can't own it. And in a world of total control, something you can't own is the most dangerous thing of all. While the history of the sunchoke is a saga of empires and industry, the science of the plant is a journey into the very architecture of the human body. To look at a Jerusalem artichoke tuber is to see a chemical masterpiece that challenges everything we think we know about nutrition. In a world dominated by simple starches and refined sugars, the sunchoke offers a radical alternative, a fuel source designed not for our tongue, but for our inner ecosystem. The defining characteristic of almost every root crop we consume, potatoes, yams, carrots, is starch. Starch is a long chain of glucose molecules that our bodies break down almost instantly, sending a surge of sugar into our bloodstream. But the sunchoke has evolved a different strategy. It does not store its energy as starch. It stores it as inulin. Inulin is a complex carbohydrate, a prebiotic fiber that the human digestive system is incapable of breaking down on its own. When you eat a sunchoke, the sugar it contains bypasses the small intestine entirely. It doesn't spike your insulin. It doesn't trigger the metabolic roller coaster that leads to inflammation and type 2 diabetes. Instead, it travels deep into the colon, where it meets our ancient allies, the trillions of bacteria that make up the human microbiome. To these beneficial bacteria, inulin is the ultimate feast. It is the high-octane fuel that allows our internal guardians, bifidobacteria and lactobacilli, to thrive and outcompete the harmful pathogens that cause modern disease. In an era where our gut health is being decimated by processed foods and antibiotics, the sunchoke is a biological reset button. It is a medicinal food that heals the gut from the inside out, boosting the immune system and regulating everything from our mood to our weight. Science is only now beginning to realize that the sun gift of the indigenous peoples was, in fact, a sophisticated probiotic technology. But the resilience of this plant extends far beyond the human gut. It is a healer of the earth itself. The sunchoke is what scientists call a bioremediator. Its roots are deep and aggressive, capable of breaking through compacted, dead soil that has been ruined by years of industrial chemicals. As it grows, it pulls heavy metals and toxins out of the earth, storing them safely in its leaves and stalks, while leaving the soil cleaner for the future. Furthermore, the sunchoke is a carbon-sequestering powerhouse. In a single season, a patch of these plants can grow 10 to 12 feet tall, pulling massive amounts of carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and pumping it into the ground. It creates more biomass per acre than almost any other temperate plant. This biomass can be turned into high-quality compost, livestock fodder, or even clean-burning biofuel. As we face a future of climate instability, of unpredictable droughts and sudden killing frosts, the sunchoke stands as a model of biological stability. It doesn't need a pristine environment. It thrives in the marginal lands, the places we've discarded. It is a plant that turns the waste of our world back into the fuel for life. The science is clear. The sunchoke isn't just a relic of the past. It is a bridge to a sustainable future. It is the ancient ally that our bodies and our planet are desperate for us to remember. As the cracks in our centralized industrial food systems become impossible to ignore, a quiet revolution is taking place in the fringes of our society. It is a movement of unlearning. People are looking past the laboratory-grown solutions and the high-tech vertical farms to rediscover the ancient technologies that have been waiting patiently in the soil. The return of the sunchoke is the centerpiece of this homecoming. In the world of permaculture and regenerative design, the Jerusalem artichoke is no longer seen as a weed, but as a cornerstone of food security. It is the perfect crop for an era of climate instability. As global weather patterns become more erratic, bringing sudden heat waves followed by unseasonable floods, the brittle uniformity of industrial monocultures is failing. We need elastic food. We need plants that don't care if the irrigation system breaks or if the supply chain for synthetic fertilizer collapses. The sunchoke is the definition of elasticity. It thrives in the marginal spaces, the edges of parking lots, the neglected corners of community gardens, and the suburban backyards that have been wasted on sterile grass for decades. It represents a shift from a culture of extraction to a culture of stewardship. By planting these tubers, we are participating in a decentralized network of abundance. We are creating food forests that require less labor and provide more resilience than any commercial farm. This is the future of proactive survival. It isn't about hoarding canned goods in a bunker. It's about turning our living landscapes into permanent pantries. It's about realizing that true wealth is not a number in a bank account, but the health of the soil beneath our feet and the diversity of the seeds in our hands. The sunchoke is a reminder that we don't need a permission slip from a corporation to be well fed. The sun gift is still being offered. We only have to be humble enough to accept it. As we return to these roots, we aren't just feeding our bodies. We are reclaiming our autonomy. Not all cultures disappear because they are inferior. Some are buried because they are too free. As we have seen, the story of the Jerusalem Artichoke is not a story of botanical failure, but of human choice. We chose the fragile over the resilient. We chose the taxable over the generous. We chose the predictable row over the wild abundance of the invincible ghost. But the sunroot did not go extinct. It went underground. It has spent the last century as a silent witness to our industrial experiment, waiting in the ditches and the abandoned plots for us to realize that true security isn't something you can buy in a plastic bag. It is a plant that challenges the very foundation of our modern world. The idea that survival must be difficult, expensive, and controlled. The sunchoke stands as a living proof that nature is not our enemy to be conquered, but a partner that has already provided the answers we are frantically trying to manufacture in laboratories. It is a reminder that the most revolutionary thing you can do in an age of total dependency is to become a little less dependent. To plant a seed that you don't have to buy again. To harvest a meal that didn't require a global logistics chain. Next time you see those tall, yellow flowers swaying in a roadside ditch or a forgotten field, don't see a weed, see a survivor. See a piece of lost technology that refused to surrender. The knowledge was never truly lost, we just stopped looking down. The sun gift is still there, resting in the cool, dark earth, waiting for the moment we decide to stop being consumers and start being stewards again. The true history of the world is not written in the names of kings or the rise of corporations. It is written in the roots. And those roots are still there, growing silently, offering us a way back to a world of independence, health, and a quiet, subterranean strength. The future doesn't belong to the loudest or the most expensive. It belongs to the ones who refuse to die.